welcome to Absolutely News. Tonight we have exclusives on what is happening in the Soviet Union today. Tonight we have an exclusive on Joseph Stalin's 5-year plan. Stalin's violence and oppression has been unleashed onto the Soviet Union, and it is definitely affecting the people. I now turn it over to Stephanie, who has the latest update on Stalin's 5-year plan.
It has been a while that Stalin declared the 5-year plan. Stalin is the supreme ruler of the Soviet Union since late 1920s. His forced collectivization of agriculture has cost millions of money, while his program of rapid industrialization achieved huge increases in Soviet productivity and economic growth. After his declaration, all industrial development has planned by the state, and all industry has been under state control. The state now decides what would be produced, how much would be produced, and where it should be produced.
Soviet Union was 50 to 100 years behind the West, and I thought that if we couldn't make up this gap within 10 years, the West would bury the USSR.
Can you tell me about the success of the 5-year plan in economical perspective?
The 5-year plan enabled USSR to not feel the effects of the Great Depression. As we needed machinery and the operators to train our workers, the West was keen to sell them. Many machines and operators came to USSR.
How about politically and in other perspectives?
The 5-year plan consolidated my position as supreme leader. I bet the new economic policy pleased many in the party. Overall, this plan has modernized Soviet agriculture, and the collective farms are more productive than the peasant farming.
However, even though the Soviet Union has developed its economics, the initial upheaval in agriculture disrupted food production. Also, Stalin instituted a campaign against alleged enemies of his regime called the Great Purge, in which hundreds of thousands were executed. Was it a good idea to declare a 5-year plan? Time will tell. I'm Stephanie Han, and this is the Absolute News.
Thank you, Stephanie. The Constitution of 1936, also known as Stalin Constitution, has been taken into effect. It was written by a special commission of 31 members that Stalin chaired himself. According to the Soviet government, the goals of this new constitution are to reflect the achievement of socialism, to institute universal suffrage, and to grant basic civil rights to the entire Soviet population. This constitution also repealed restrictions on voting and added universal direct suffrage. We shall see how this affects the Soviet Union. Stalin and his followers are in full control of the Communist Party, which controls all parts of the government. Stalin is using his power to effectively govern his country. Stalin has initiated the Great Purge, which is causing widespread paranoia and repression, which is causing a series of show trials and the purging of all original party members. We have Brianna out in the field to give you the latest.
The Great Purge was a series of repressive measures in the Soviet Union in the late 1930s. This involved a large-scale purge of the Communist Party and government officials, repression of peasants, Red Army leadership, and unaffiliated persons in an atmosphere of widespread surveillance and suspicion of saboteurs. Proportionately, most of the victims of the Great Purge were old Bolshevik. Here is a woman whose husband was one of the victims, named Georgia. So, what happened to your husband, Mrs. Georgia?
During the time, everybody was so starving, and of course my husband and I were too. One day, he was trying to steal food from somebody else who was in high position, and that guy caught my husband, and he was was trying to kill my husband with their weapon. And my poor husband just died.
I'm absolutely sure that you're really sad. What do you think about the situation?
Well, everybody was very scary at the time, and he was the icon of a horror. He killed and tortured people like randomly.
Who was he?
Stalin, Joseph Stalin.
Well, I can tell you were in a huge terror at that time. Thank you for the interview, Mrs. Georgia. It was so much great time.
You're welcome.
The German Soviet, also known as the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact, after the two foreign ministers who negotiated the agreement had two parts. An economic agreement signed on August 19, 1939, provided that Germany would exchange manufactured goods for Soviet raw materials. Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union also signed a 10-year non-aggression pact on August 23, 1939, in which each signatory promised not to attack the other.
Analyze about the defeat of Germany by the Soviets. And today, the Absolute News has finally organized all the circumstances during the war. The Allies were fighting the German on the other front, and it helped to take the pressure off the Soviet Union. The Germans thought that all the good officers of the Soviet Union were killed during the Great Purge, and thought that they could defeat the Soviet Union again. However, the winter during the German invasion was one of the most severe on record, and they lost many of their troops. Soviet Union was able to manufacture war materials quickly from the natural resources it possessed. But Germany has no natural resources, and it required time to get them. For those reasons, Soviet Union was able to defeat Germany. Now I turn it over to Annika, who has the latest update on their experiences.
German leader Hitler had overconfidence in his troops and believed that he would easily get a victory over the USSR. He withdrew some of the troops in the division that was headed this way, because he thought that they would easily get a victory by autumn. However, they were not prepared for the hardships of the Soviet Union winter that came along. The temperatures dropped to the negatives, and the German soldiers suffered from the lack of winter clothing, and thousands froze to death. I am here with a German soldier who witnessed this event. What was the war like through the harsh winter?
Oh mein Gott, es war schrecklich, es war eine jammerliche Zeit. Auf English. Well, there were soldiers, they were dying and they were getting frostbite, and many of them who got the frostbites had to get their feet and hand Abschnitt cut off, amputated. We were not prepared for this at all. Our uniforms, our clothing was not warm enough, and so we got extremely cold, cold, yes.
Did your troops eventually get warm clothing?
Oh yeah, the Deutsche citizens, the German people, they collected winter clothing for us, but it didn't reach us in the front. So we would take the uniform and the socks off of the Leichen, the dead people from our enemies.
Okay, that sounds absolutely terrible. Thank you so much for joining us.
Ja, es gern geschehen. Es lebe Deutschland.
The Soviet Union definitely had advantages in the war against Germany. There were more casualties due to the weather and illness than there were from the war. And back to you in the studio.
Thank you so much for watching Absolutely News.
If you missed any part of our show today, find us on YouTube. Just search Absolutely News. Thank you so much for watching Absolutely News.
If you missed any part of our show today, just search on Google.
YouTube! It's YouTube!
Thank you so much for watching Absolutely News.
If you missed any part of our shows, just find us on Google.